They told her she was in the wrong room. By the time the manager arrived, she was the name above the door. Priya Nair had worked the catering corridor at the Aldrin Grand for exactly 7 weeks when she saw the thing that changed the way she understood the building. It was a Thursday evening, the founder's dining room half filled with the quiet industry of a private reservation floor, linen pressed flat, glasses upright, the low sound of a room where everyone had been expected. Priya was moving through the service corridor with a tray of water carafes when she heard Colin Drew's voice carry through the archway, and she slowed without meaning to. "This floor is by reservation only." Drew was stationed at the entrance in his double-breasted uniform, hands clasped at his waist, his voice carrying the particular smoothness of a man who had decided a situation before walking into it. "The main restaurant is 1 level down. I'm sure they'll have something for you." The woman he was speaking to was perhaps 75, perhaps older. It was difficult to say, and would have been impolite to try. She wore a charcoal dress and a single strand of pearls, and she stood at the archway with the stillness of someone who had been interrupted mid-thought and was choosing, carefully, not to react. Beside her stood a young man in his early 20s, her grandson by the look of them, the same wide-set eyes, the same quality of attention. He had gone still too, but his stillness was a different kind. The stillness of someone who understood exactly what he was watching and was waiting to see how his grandmother would handle it. She handled it the way she apparently handled everything. "I have a reservation," she said, "under Ellison Hart, the standing booking for the south corner table." Drew did not consult the ledger. Priya noticed that. He did not look down at the reservation book on the stand behind him, did not glance at the screen, did not reach for anything. He simply looked at the woman in front of him, her age, her bearing, the pearls, the quiet, and he reached a conclusion that had nothing to do with any of those things. "I'm not seeing it," he said. "I really think there's been a mix-up. If you'd like, the main restaurant can accommodate you this evening." "I'd like you to check again," the woman said. Her voice had not changed in pitch or tempo. It was not a request dressed up as a suggestion. It was a sentence complete. Drew's smile thinned at the edges. "I've checked. This is a private floor." The young man beside her drew breath. She touched his arm once, a light touch, barely a second, and he let the breath out. Priya set the tray down on the corridor shelf and stayed where she was. The woman opened her handbag. She produced a small ivory card, the kind that said nothing on the front except a name and a single line of text, and she held it toward Drew without extending her arm. She waited for him to come to her. He did not come to her. "Ma'am, I can't just—" "I'd like you to call Mr. Osai," she said. Richard Osai was the general manager. Priya had met him once during orientation, a measured man in his 50s who moved through the building as though he were taking stock of it. "Would you do that, please?" It was not a question. Drew's expression moved through several small adjustments: impatience, indulgence, the particular annoyance of a man who has decided he is being tested by someone who does not understand how rooms like this work. "Mr. Os isn't available for—" "He'll want to be available for this one," the woman said. And then she did something Priya would think about for a long time afterward. She looked up, not at Drew, not at the room, not at her grandson, but at the archway above the entrance to the founder's dining room. Her gaze moved to the bronze plaque mounted at the keystone, the one Priya had walked past every shift for 7 weeks without reading. The woman looked at it the way you look at something that belongs to you, not with pride, or with performance, but with the plain acknowledgement of a fact. Priya looked up too. The plaque read, "This room established in perpetual honor of the Ellison Hart Foundation, whose enduring generosity made it possible. 1987. Priya looked back at the woman. The woman had already lowered her gaze to Drew. She had not said a word about the plaque. She had simply looked at it, and then she had looked at him, and in the space between those two things she had made the entire argument. Drew had not looked up. Priya crossed the corridor to the house phone on the wall and lifted it before she fully understood she was going to. She asked for Mr. Osai's extension. She said there was something on the founder's floor he should come and see. She did not elaborate. She hung up and went back to the archway and stood just inside the service corridor door, and she waited. The room behind her had gone quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when something has shifted in the air, and no one has yet said what it is. The guests at the south corner table, empty, she now saw, conspicuously set for two, had stopped their conversation. A server near the sideboard had found a reason to stay very still. Drew was still talking. He had moved into the register of finality, the tone that said the matter was settled and the next step was departure. He was explaining with diminishing courtesy that the founder's room maintained strict protocols, that he was sure she understood, that the main restaurant would be pleased too. The woman let him finish. Then she said, "He's coming." She did not say it like a threat. She said it like a fact, because it was one Priya had just made it true, and her voice had the quality of someone reading aloud from a document that had already been signed. Richard Osai came through the main entrance 40 seconds later. He was in his suit jacket, which meant he had come from his office rather than the floor, and he moved at the pace of a man who had understood from the phone call that this was not a question of hospitality logistics. He stopped at the archway. He looked at the woman. He looked up at the plaque. He looked back at the woman. "Mrs. Ellison Hart," he said. And the way he said it, not loudly, not with performance, but with the simple, direct weight of a man acknowledging the full dimensions of a situation, was the sound of the room reorganizing itself. He turned to Drew. What followed was brief and entirely quiet. Osai spoke to Drew in a voice that Priya could not fully hear from where she stood, but she did not need to hear the words. She could read the shape of them in the way Drew's shoulders changed, the slow collapse of a certainty that had been wrong from the first moment and was only now being informed of the fact. Osai removed a small folded card from his breast pocket and held it out to Drew. Drew looked at it. He did not move for a moment. Then he took it. He was suspended from the founder's floor pending a formal HR review, effective immediately. One of the senior servers would cover the room. Osai turned back to Mrs. Ellison Hart and her grandson. "Please," he said. He extended his hand toward the south corner table, the one that had been set for them, the one with the light angled across it the way it always was on Thursday evenings, the way it had been for 37 years. "Your table is ready." She walked past the archway, past the plaque with her family's name on it, past the guests who had found reasons to look at their water glasses, and she sat down. Her grandson sat across from her. He picked up his menu, and then he put it down, and he looked at her across the table, and she looked back at him, and something passed between them that Priya could not name and felt she had no right to. Priya went back through the service corridor to the preparation room and printed the letter that Richard Osai had asked her to prepare before he came down. A formal written apology on Aldrin Grand letterhead, addressed to Mrs. Constance Ellison Hart, signed by the general manager, placed in a cream envelope with the hotel's seal pressed on the flap. She carried it herself. When she set it beside the bread plate, Mrs. Ellison Hart looked up at her. Not through her, not past her, at her, the way you look at a person when you want them to understand they are seen. "Thank you," she said. Priya said, "I'm sorry it was necessary," and she meant it in all the ways the words could carry. She went back to the corridor and finished her shift, but she stopped at the archway on the way out, the way she had not stopped in 7 weeks, and she read the plaque properly, all of it, the dates, the language, the full name of the foundation, and she stayed there long enough to understand that the room she had been walking through every day was not just a room. It was a name. It was a promise kept across decades. It was still there on the wall above the door, unhurried and permanent, waiting for anyone who thought to look up. She thought about Drew. She thought about the way he had never looked up. She thought about Mrs. Ellison Hart, who had looked up at it once and said nothing, and let it speak. That was the night Priya learned the difference between knowing a building and understanding it. The Aldrin Grand was full of rooms, but that one had a name, and the name had been there all along, above the door, waiting for someone to deserve the reading of it. The south corner table was the last to finish that evening. The grandson said something that made his grandmother laugh, a real laugh, the kind that doesn't perform itself, and the sound of it moved through the quiet room like something that had been waiting a long time to arrive.